That morning, I drove my old Ford along the winding roads of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Fog lay heavy, so white and thick the headlights only carved a few feet ahead. The air carried the damp scent of pine and stone, cool against the skin, yet weighted somehow. I switched on the radio, then shut it off again. On roads like these, silence often felt more fitting. Then, I heard it. Not the chatter of birds hidden in the trees, not the faint rush of a stream. It was a broken sound, rough, strangled, like breath snagged in a throat. Weak, exhausted. A sound that made my foot ease off the gas without thinking. I pulled to the shoulder and stepped out. Gravel crunched wet beneath my boots. Mountain wind slapped my face, sharp with morning moisture. I stood still, listening. The sound came again, closer this time, ragged. I followed the roadside where tall grass sagged under beads of dew. At the curve, the ground opened into a shallow drainage ditch, and there I saw it, a small shape, curled tight in the soaked weeds. At first glance, I thought it was just a discarded trash bag, but when I stepped closer, my chest cinched like a vice. A Doberman puppy, smaller than a loaf of bread. Its body trembled, the black and tan coat matted with mud and clinging to skin stretched thin. Ribs jutted like steps on a broken ladder. Frail legs tucked beneath it, shivering, and its muzzle, bound tight by a loop of rusted wire. The wire bit deep into tender flesh, swollen and raw, purple where it tore open, oozing blood. Red streaks mixed with dew, trailing down its throat in thin lines. It couldn't bark. It couldn't open its mouth. Each sound was nothing more than a strangled rasp, every breath a battle that might be its last. But the eyes, those amber eyes, locked on me, wide, shaking, drowning in fear. And yet, inside them, a flicker, a plea. I froze. My heart hammered so hard it felt ready to break free. The morning air grew heavier, laced with iron, with wet earth, with the bitter stench of abandonment. I stepped down into the ditch. Cold mud seeped through my shoes, denim darkening with moisture. My hands trembled, but I dropped to my knees, leaned low. "Hey," I whispered, voice rough, straining to stay calm. The pup recoiled, not from the chill, not from the startled cry of a bird overhead. From me. Its body drew tight, a live wire stretched to breaking, ready to flee, though it had no strength left to stand. I understood. Other hands had taught it that people meant pain, so I didn't rush. I let the fog soak my hair, the mud stain my clothes, the mountain wind sting my skin. I stayed still, letting it see. Not every hand would harm. Time slowed. Seconds dragged into long, aching minutes. Then, those eyes stopped darting. They fixed on me, still wary but no longer entirely lost. And in that mist-shrouded morning, a vow carved itself deep in my chest. I would not leave it. Not in this frozen ditch, not under this silent sky, and never, never would I let it die bound in silence. 10 minutes on a normal morning is nothing. But here, with a life counting each fragile breath, it stretched into eternity. I lowered myself further until my eyes met those amber ones. Fog still clung to the grass, tiny droplets sliding onto my shoulders. The world had gone unnaturally quiet. Only the sweep of wind through pines and the rough, shallow breaths of the pup remained. I spoke softly, slowly, and low. "It's all right, kid. We're gonna be okay." It blinked, shuddered. I watched its thin chest heave so fast it seemed ready to splinter. Each inhale pulled the wire tighter, cutting deeper, coaxing blood that beaded and ran. I knew, if that muzzle wasn't freed soon, hours were all it had left. Carefully, I shrugged off my flannel, damp from fog, and spread it across the wet grass in front of me. It wasn't much, but it carried familiar scents. Motor oil from the garage, pine wood from the cabin back in Asheville, even a trace of weak coffee. I wanted to know. Not everything that approached meant pain. It looked at the shirt, then at me. Those trembling eyes weighed the choice, flee or stay. I kept my distance, hand resting open on my knee, showing everything, hiding nothing. "See," I whispered, "I've got nothing to hurt you with." Suddenly, a gust whipped through the trees, branches rattling overhead, its ears pinned back, its body convulsed in fear. I held my breath, terrified the fragile bridge I'd built would collapse. But it didn't run. Instead, its head dipped, nose brushing the edge of the flannel. My heart twisted, not from pity, but because that was a signal. It was trying to believe. Right then, I fumbled for my phone, fingers numb from cold. I tapped the number I knew by heart. Dr. Marissa Hayes, the young vet in town. She once patched up the neighbor's dog. If anyone could handle this, it was her. The line clicked, her voice raspy, thick with sleep. "Hello? Marissa, it's Caleb. I found a Doberman pup in the ditch near mile marker 12, wire around the muzzle. It's bad." A beat of silence. Then her voice sharpened, steady as steel. "Don't touch the wire. Don't let it run. I'm on my way. 10 minutes. I ended the call, eyes never leaving the pup. 10 minutes. To me, nothing. To it, an entire battle for life. I stayed there, knees sinking deeper in mud, holding the space just right, close enough so it could see me, far enough not to spook it. I filled the silence with words, anything to keep the air steady between us. I talked about the little garage with the clang of hammers, about my coffee so weak folks made fun of it, about mornings I'd fixed cars in fog just like this one. My voice blended with the wind, as if I were talking to myself. It watched me, eyes wide, still doubtful, but the way its breathing slowed, just a notch, told me it was listening. Then another sound broke through the mist, the growl of a small truck, tires crunching wet gravel. I turned. Amber headlights cut through the fog, pinning the roadside. The familiar Chevy rolled to a stop. The door swung open. Marissa stepped out, denim jacket, cap pulled low, medical bag in one hand, a handling pole in the other. Her eyes flicked from me to the pup, freezing when they caught the wire glistening red. "God," she murmured. Then to me, "We have to move slowly, Caleb. If it bolts, we lose our only chance." I nodded. Didn't stand. Didn't reach. I knew. I was the fragile tether keeping it there. Marissa lowered the pole, circling wide to avoid its direct line of sight. And me. I lowered my voice to a breath. "It's okay now, kid. We're almost out of this." Those amber eyes flickered, trapped between fear and hope, and I realized these 10 minutes had carried us right to the threshold of a miracle. Marissa lowered the catchpole, her eyes fixed on the trembling puppy in the ditch. I stayed on my knees, holding the distance. Any sudden move and it would bolt, straight into the fog-thick forest, swallowed whole. "Caleb, keep talking to it," Marissa murmured. Her voice carried steel, but also the gentleness her profession had forced her to master. I swallowed hard. Its breathing was still frantic, chest fluttering so violently I thought it might snap. "Listen, kid," I whispered. "I know you're worn out, but just a little longer, freedom's waiting." Those amber eyes widened, locking on mine. For a heartbeat, I saw the light inside them quiver. Fear hadn't gone, but something else stirred beneath it. Marissa began to move, slow as a shadow. She circled behind, keeping clear of its direct gaze. The pole stayed low, angled like a harmless branch. She was waiting for my signal. I inhaled deep, leaned lower, extended a hand forward, not touching, just letting warmth and the smell of skin fill the gap. 1 second, 2. It didn't back away. That was the moment. "Now," I whispered. Marissa swung the loop low, sliding it gently from the side. A faint metallic click rang out as the circle cinched clean around its neck. It jolted, body vibrating like an over-tightened string. I shot my hand higher, my voice urgent. "Easy, easy, kid." The words weren't commands, but cover, louder than its panic. The eyes snapped back to mine, shivering but still. Just then, Marissa pulled. Not hard, only enough to hold. I lunged, dropping beside it, pressing my palm to its back. Its body was stiff as iron, but it didn't thrash. I could feel the heart pounding wildly beneath its drenched fur. "Good," I breathed out. "That's good." Together we lifted it. The weight was terrifyingly light. A Doberman should have been muscle, force, but in my arms it was nothing more than bones wrapped in wet hair. I cradled it close to my chest, careful to avoid the wire still biting its muzzle. Its breath rasped hot against my collar, harsh, broken. Just that sound was enough to close my throat tight. Marissa swung open the Chevy's rear door. Inside, a towel was spread, a small battery heater humming. I laid the pup down, kept my hand resting on its back so it knew it wasn't alone. It didn't fight, didn't growl, just stared, wide-eyed, exhausted, wary, but clinging to my gaze like it was the only solid thing left. Marissa shut the door, turned to me. "We have to move now. If not, infection will eat those wounds alive." I nodded, climbing into the back seat. I wasn't about to leave it alone. The engine roared, the truck jolted forward, and we rolled down the fog-bound road. In the rear, it curled tight, eyes still open, no rest, no surrender, as though sleep was a luxury it couldn't afford, and letting go meant death. I pressed my palm gently along its narrow frame, counting the frantic beats of its heart. "You'll be all right, Rook," I whispered. The name slipped out unbidden, not to claim it now, but to plant a seed for what might come. The truck descended, the town materializing beyond the veil of mist. A weathered wooden building glowed faintly, Marissa's clinic. The door burst open, and Irene, the seasoned vet nurse, stood ready on the steps, a tray of instruments already in hand. The first ride had carried it from the cold ditch, but the real fight was only just beginning. The clinic sat on the edge of town, an old wooden house rebuilt into a place of healing. When Marissa braked in front, the door had already swung open. Irene, veterinary nurse with decades behind her, waited with a tray of instruments. Warm light spilled out from inside, cutting through the stubborn fog. We carried him in. His body was so light it terrified me. When I set him on the cold steel table, it felt like laying down a bundle of brittle twigs wrapped in wet fur. The air inside was nothing like outside. The sharp bite of antiseptic filled my nose. Fluorescent bulbs ticked overhead. Heat radiated from a small electric heater. Safe, but tense. Marissa motioned. "Caleb, keep your hand on his back. Don't let him jerk." I pressed my palm between his tiny shoulders, feeling the frantic hammering breath. Irene prepared a syringe, fine and small. "Just a light dose," Marissa said. "Enough to calm him, but not take his breath." I nodded, afraid my voice would break if I tried to answer. The needle touched a vein, his body flinched, but then the lids grew heavy. Breathing slowed, deeper, fragile, but there. I bent close, listening to each rise and fall. Still here. The surgical lamp snapped on. White light fell sharp as a blade over his small frame. The wire showed clearly now, rust black, carved into swollen flesh, skin torn, purple, bleeding. Marissa took the wire cutters, glanced at me, and gave the smallest nod. I pressed firmer on his back, letting him know, I'm still here. The first sound jolted me. A crack, harsh and final. The first loop snapped. The skin beneath flushed red, as though freed from a trap it had endured for days. Blood welled, copper mixing with antiseptic sting. I swallowed hard, pressing down not to hold him, but to keep my own hands from shaking. The second loop was worse. The wire had bitten deep, flesh split open around it. Marissa had to angle the cutter so close that a slip would tear it wider. Irene braced him tight, sweat beading on her temple. I heard the metal grind, then crack. Another piece fell away, leaving a raw groove seeping red. Almost there, kid. Just a little more, I whispered, words as much for me as for him. One by one, the wires clattered into the steel tray. Each clang is a punctuation mark, closing the sentence of his silent suffering. At last, the final loop gave. It dropped with a sharp ring. I exhaled, like breaking the surface of deep water. His muzzle lay bare, swollen, purpled, torn, bleeding, but free. Irene moved quickly, dabbing with antiseptic gauze. He twitched, even through sedation. I bent low, whispering in his ear, It's all right now, kid. You're free. Marissa smeared antibiotic over every cut. Each touch made my brow knot, as though my skin might take the pain for him. She wrapped the muzzle in white gauze, not tight, just enough to shield it from infection. The bandage stood out stark against his black and tan coat, a mark of wound, yet also a sign of hope. Done, Marissa breathed, setting the cutters aside. He's weak, but the heartbeat's steady. We made it in time. I pressed my hand to his throat, felt the rhythm, slower now, but strong. Warmth spread from his tiny body, replacing the icy chill of the ditch where I'd found him. We shifted him into the heated kennel at the corner. Soft yellow light bathed him, like a small sun in that sterile room. I knelt, slipped my hand through the bars, and rested it gently on his back. He didn't flinch. In fact, his head tilted toward my touch, seeking warmth. For the first time since I'd found him, I believed this pup would live. And maybe, from that very moment, so would I. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the small clinic window, drawing long bars across the white tile floor. The smell of coffee from the staff room mingled with the sharp tang of antiseptic. I sat in a metal chair beside the heated kennel, chin resting on my hand, eyes fixed on the fragile life curled beneath the blanket. He lay still, but his breathing had steadied. The white bandage around his muzzle stood out against the black and tan fur, yesterday soaked and filthy, now dry, cleaner. I cracked the kennel door open, careful not to shatter the fragile silence. The hinge creaked, and one ear twitched. Amber eyes blinked open, cloudy in the morning light. They locked on me, not fleeing, not approaching, just watching, tense but quiet. I whispered, "Morning, kid." No reaction, except the tail, barely, a flick softer than a breeze through grass. My chest tightened at the sight. The days that followed carved their rhythm. Each morning, Marissa changed the bandages, cleaned the wounds. At first, his body stiffened, breath ragged at every touch. But with time, the trembling eased. I was always there, close by, hand resting lightly on his back so he knew he wasn't alone. On the third day, I brought an old navy sweater from home. The cuffs were frayed, still carrying the scent of coffee and pine from the workshop. I spread it inside the kennel. He lowered his nose, slow, cautious, drew in a deep breath, then rested his head on the fabric. That simple gesture stung my eyes. That afternoon, Irene arrived with a bowl of thin meat porridge, food meant for animals just out of surgery. At first, he only stared, suspicion burning in his gaze, as if the bowl itself were a trap. I sat by the kennel, saying nothing. Minutes passed. Then his nose brushed the rim, tongue flicking out, taking one small bite. The faint sound of him swallowing felt like air filling my lungs for the first time in days. By the 5th day, when I opened the kennel to change the blanket, he stepped out. No rush, no panic. Just 3 shaky steps, legs quivering as if they might splinter. But he walked. He stopped before my knees, lifted his head. I didn't move. I waited. Then I felt it. His breath, warm, brushing my hand. Tentative. Fragile. A bridge stretched thin across the gulf between fear and trust. Slowly, I placed my palm on his neck. This time, he didn't pull away. He even closed his eyes for a fleeting moment, as if conceding that this touch was different from the ones that hurt him. I whispered, voice nearly gone, "Good boy, Rook." The name slipped out naturally. I'd chosen it for a chess piece my father once taught me to play. The rook, steady, unyielding, always standing guard. It felt right for a life that had fought so hard to endure. From that moment, everything shifted. His eyes no longer held only fear. I saw something waiting there, a flicker of belief just beginning. And I knew we were halfway across. Time inside the clinic moved to its own rhythm. Mornings began with the clatter of trays, the sting of disinfectant drifting down the hall, and the faint cries of cats and dogs behind closed kennels. I had grown used to sitting beside Rook, my hand resting on his back while Marissa or Irene changed his bandages. But then, something new began to happen. On the 10th day, I opened the kennel to let him walk slowly around the room. His steps still wobbled, but firmer than the first. He didn't run or sniff wildly, just circled with steady patience. Then, passing another kennel, he stopped. Inside was Buck, an old hound. Buck was known in this place for turning his face to the wall, refusing to look at anyone. He lived sealed off, unreachable. Rook sat down right in front of Buck's cage. His tail tapped the floor, slow, steady, like a patient drumbeat. Buck stirred. For the first time in weeks, that tired gaze shifted away from the wall. They stared at each other. No bark, no sudden move. Just one long sigh before Buck lowered his chin to his paws and turned his face outward. A small gesture, but I knew it was a turning point. The next day, as Rook padded down the hallway, he stopped before a calico cat's kennel. That cat had a reputation for fury, ears flat, back arched at anyone who dared draw near. I braced to step in, but Rook turned his back to the hall and sat still, facing the kennel. He did nothing, just sat, silent. At first, the cat hissed, then fell quiet. Minutes later, its tail dropped, eyes opening to meet Rook's calm presence, as though forced to acknowledge it. I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing. By the 2nd week, a rain-soaked kitten arrived, shivering, crying itself hoarse. A towel draped over the cage did nothing. The sound cut sharply through the clinic, a cry that pierced my chest. Rook heard. He trotted over, lay down with his back against the cage like a wall. He didn't look directly, just shielded. 10 minutes later, silence. When Irene lifted the towel, the kitten was asleep, curled tight in the corner. Marissa stood in the doorway, arms folded, her expression unreadable. After a moment, she said softly, "Not every animal has this. He understands fear, and he knows how to quiet it." I didn't answer. I only looked at Rook, head slightly raised, amber eyes gazing into the air, silent. I thought of him in the ditch, muzzle bound, body shaking, eyes pleading. Maybe because he had lived inside fear, he knew how to lift it from others. From that day, Rook became part of the clinic's rhythm. After breakfast, after the bandages were changed, he walked the hallway in slow patrol, stopping at each cage, sitting, leaving behind a little piece. Sometimes just a soft tail wag, sometimes his whole body lying down like a shield. People began to give him names. Irene smiled and called him the little doctor. Marissa shook her head. "No, he's more like a keeper of order, a peace guard." I didn't use those names. To me, he was simply Rook. He needed nothing else. But I knew what he was doing changed more than the animals around him. It changed me. Because every afternoon, when the clinic settled into quiet, I sat beside him. Rook rested his head on my arm, eyes half shut, breath steady. And I realized the same stillness he offered those wounded creatures was mending the broken spaces inside me, too. That day came sooner than I thought. The clinic opened like any other morning, sunlight spilling through the old wooden frame. On the bulletin board by the desk, Marissa had pinned a sheet introducing Rook to anyone who might want to adopt. I knew it was inevitable. I'd told myself a dozen times. I was the one who found him, but that didn't mean I had to keep him forever. He deserved more than the reach of my arms. He deserved a home. One afternoon, a couple walked in. The man, silver-haired and frail, moved slowly. Beside him, the woman held his arm, her gaze kind but shadowed with grief. They didn't rush with questions. They simply stood, eyes fixed on Rook, caught in the glow of those amber eyes. I opened the kennel door. Rook didn't leap, didn't bark. He stepped out, calm, and walked straight to the man. Then he lowered his muzzle onto the trembling hand. Simple, silent. But in that moment, I knew. He had chosen. The man's voice cracked. "We lost our granddaughter last year. Since then, the house has been nothing but the ticking of clocks. But when I look at him, I feel something returning." The woman bent, cradling Rook's head, whispering, "Thank you for surviving, to find us." Tears came before I could stop them, because I understood. This moment wasn't just salvation for Rook. It was salvation for them too. They signed the papers. Before leaving, Rook turned back. I bent low, pressing my forehead to his, whispering, "Go, Rook. This is home now." They walked out into the afternoon, sunlight gilding his silver hair. Their figures grew small, but inside me a strange peace settled. A month later, I visited. A white house with a broad porch sat by the barley fields. Rook ran the fence line, strong black and tan coat glinting in the sun. When he saw me, he didn't charge. He paused, sat, then came forward slowly, nudging his head against my knee. As if to say, "I'm all right. Are you?" Inside, on the bookshelf, among old photos of their granddaughter, there was a new frame. Rook stretched on the rug, his head on the man's leg, the woman tucking a blanket over him. And I understood. Miracles aren't always beams of light from the heavens. Sometimes they are small lives, once silenced by wire, who learn how to mend the cracks in human hearts. I stood on the porch, watching Rook race across the yard, and thought back to that foggy morning. If I'd walked past, if I'd ignored the rasping sound in the ditch, none of this would exist. It is the smallest moments, the ones when we stop, open our hearts, and reach out, that change two lives at once. Love between people and animals doesn't need words. It lives in the eyes, in a gentle touch, in the steady breath of sleeping side by side. And sometimes, it's strong enough to heal wounds language never could. When I left the porch, I turned back one last time. Rook lay with his head across the man's lap, amber eyes half closed in the evening glow. I knew he had found where he belonged. And I knew, too, this world will always hold hope as long as we keep stopping, listening, and loving. There are sounds you only hear once, but they stay with you for life. For me, it was that rasping breath in the morning ditch. It led me to Rook, a small life once bound in silence. But because of that fragile trust, a new road opened. Today, Rook lives in a home filled with love. He wasn't just rescued. He rescued the hearts of those who had lost. And I believe that is the simplest miracle of all. Love that needs no words. Just a touch, a look, the patience to stay. If you're listening to this story and you've ever saved a small animal, share it in the comments below. Perhaps your story will inspire someone else to open their arms to a life in need. And if you believe every creature deserves a second chance, hit subscribe and ring the bell. Every click is more than a number. It's a promise that more stories will be told, more lives protected, more hearts warmed. Love more. And never walk past a trembling life in the shadows of this world, because you might be the only miracle it needs.